Alright, so last time around we dropped some choice things on you guys about the older Batman and Superman movies. Now, even though we barely scratched the surface on those films, this part 2 is going to shift time. Today we're digging into the Christopher Nolan Batman films and Man of Steel. Here are 7 more things you didn't know about Batman and or Superman, probably. We're going to begin with Batman Begins, because you probably don't know how intense the secrecy surrounding its development and filming was. Every detail had to be under wraps until the filmmakers and the studio were ready to release them to the public, so that meant using a code name for the production, and the code name was The Intimidation Game. So, according to the contracts anyway, Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, David S. Goyer, all those guys, technically, they never actually signed on to make Batman Begins. And even with the security of a code name, none of the Warner Brothers executives were sent scripts for the film. They all had to come to Christopher Nolan's house and read copies of it in his garage. I have to say, I think making them read in the garage was more about Nolan sticking it to the suits than it was about secrecy. Like he had his own intimidation game going. Just before starting on the Intimidation Game, aka Batman Begins, Christian Bale was finishing The Machinist, so he was going to need to gain a lot of weight to play Batman.
Perfect fit.
Christopher Nolan told Bale to, quote, get as big as you possibly can. Well, Bale took him at his word and it totally backfired. He went a bit overboard and got too big and was just this big bear of a guy. He was around 220 and looking way more like Fat Man than Batman.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do.
In the end, the trainers were able to get the bulk off of him, lean him out, and get him into fighting shape for the film. But Bale wasn't the only actor who had to transform for the Dark Knight trilogy. That was a segue. While Batman/Bruce Wayne isn't meant to be a crazy massive dude, Bane is. So for The Dark Knight Rises, Tom Hardy had to go from about 165 pounds to 190. The trainers had to work with him differently because Bane wasn't supposed to look like some Adonis with defined washboard abs. He was meant to have a physique kind of like an old-timey circus strongman. You know, like these guys.
Great day to be doing squat thrusts and lifting our huge triangular iron weights.
Anyway, Bane definitely looks like someone who you don't want to fuck with, so I'd say those trainers definitely did the job.
You don't fear death. You welcome it. Your punishment must be more severe.
While Bane's physical presence is undeniably intimidating, there's still debate over what's up with his voice to this day. We can all agree that Tom Hardy made a choice alright, but you probably don't know that his choice was based on specific points of reference.
Passion, you see, can be destroyed by a doctor.
Bane's voice is based on 2 people. The first was Richard Burton. Hardy used Burton's voice as somewhat of a template, doing an approximation of an older Richard Burton, as he might have played an off-center English villain. The other piece of the puzzle is the accent. Early on, there was an idea that Bane should be a Latino and should have a Hispanic accent, but Hardy decided to take things back even farther and look at Latin and Gypsy influences, stumbling upon a guy named Bartley Gorman, a famous bare-knuckle fighter known as the King of the Gypsies.
When I get men in front of me, they try to kill me. They try to wipe me off the face of the earth.
In the end, Hardy used Gorman's accent as the basis for Bane's. So, old Richard Burton voice plus semi-obscure bare-knuckle fighter accent equals Bane.
I'm Gotham's reckoning. It and the borrowed time you've all been living on.
You know, even though we literally just explained it, I still don't know if that really explains it. Let's move on and get into some Superman things. Things like General Zod's costume not being real, as in it isn't really there, and Michael Shannon isn't really wearing it. Shannon just wore a motion capture suit throughout filming, and his entire costume was built on top of the mocap suit in post, which means he had to act really menacing for several months while wearing nothing but a leotard. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is acting, with capital letters. See all those squiggles on the walls and the thrones and even on the Warner Brothers logo at the beginning? You might have known that this was meant to be written in the language of Krypton, which suspiciously sounds a lot like English.
What would you have us do, Al?
Look to the stars.
But what you probably didn't know is those squiggles actually say things. The production team came up with various phrases and credos for the Kryptonians in English and then made up a written language so they could translate the phrases from Krypton and incorporate them into the production design. What I'm saying is they basically half-assed Klingon, which I guess is better than no-assing it, right? Moving on. Remember this part with Clark Kent's classroom freakout? Zack Snyder and the team decided they didn't want his ability to see through things to look like the X-ray vision we've seen a million times before. What you may not know is how they settled on this aesthetic to establish his newly discovered ability. The point of inspiration was John Carpenter's They Live. They set out to match the freakiness of Carpenter's style, and the similarity is undeniable, though I wouldn't have minded also hearing Superman say this to Zod later on in the film.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hopefully you are now 7 things smarter about Batman and Superman. We haven't exhausted our supply of lesser-known facts about these movies, so maybe we'll get around to doing a part 3 sometime. You know, if you guys are into it. In the meantime, thanks for watching our very special episodes of Batman v Superman, Things You Didn't Know, and be sure to check out Cinefix.com and subscribe for more true-ish things about movies, and sometimes Rowdy Roddy Piper, right here on Things You Didn't Know.